Hey, what's up guys? Today I am doing my top 10 books of 2022, and I have to be honest, this year has been a weird reading year for me. I haven't actually had any books that have stood out to me and I'm like, yes, this is a favourite of all time. Like, I have read a couple series which we'll get to, which I absolutely loved, but they haven't stuck with me in terms of like, I'm going to reread them over and over again. You know, the way that I was when I first read Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights or The Bell Jar, you know, those like books that I hold as like personal favourites of all time. Like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Like, nothing's really hit for me the same this year, which is a shame, but I do still have some pretty great books on this list for you to hopefully also read. I have enjoyed a lot of the books I've read. They just haven't stuck with me as like all-time favourites the way that I have had in previous years, but hopefully 2023 will be different. You never know, I might read a new favourite book of all time, fingers crossed, in 2023. So I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please leave a like and please subscribe. This is the first time I've filmed a bookish video in so long, since definitely October I think it was, which is kind of scary, but we're here, we're back in the book in the bookish realm. So yeah, please leave a like and please subscribe, and let's get on to book number 10. So book 10, I really debated, I went back and forth, should I include this or not? And in the end, I'm including it purely because of how fun it was, and you know, the whole series for me, it was just so fun. And originally I gave this book 3 stars, so you know, it really shouldn't be on like a top 10 books of the year list. It's a 3-star book. I had lots of 5-star books, but when I was going through all the books I read this year, this was the one I was like, that is the most fun I've had all year. Was reading that series with books. Obviously I've had fun other than books, but yeah, anyway, that is 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. I read the 50 Shades trilogy kind of back to back. I just like went through them so fast, and I read all 3 books so fast. I think I read them in like 2 days each for the most part. And if you do not know, 50 Shades of Grey, I feel like I feel so silly saying like what it's about because everyone knows what it's about, but it is a dark erotic romance about a couple called Anna and Christian, and she is like a shy, kind of not nerdy, but just like quiet girl, and he is this like kinky, dominating, super wealthy billionaire almost figure, and they come together, and he is controlling, he is jealous, he is nasty, he is evil almost at some points. But that's part of the fun. Like, the part of the fun is the toxicity of it all. And obviously in real life, this type of relationship, like, you guys aren't dumb, you know, I don't have to explain this, but do not approve of that in real life. But in fiction, in a book, where it's like just a safe little space to read some stuff that you don't want to read about in real life. Yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed this series. I do keep meaning to read the series where it's written from his point of view. I own the first one, Grey. I just haven't got to it. Yeah, I think maybe next year I will. At first I was planning on reading that as well, like straight after, but then I needed a little break. I was like, you know, it's the same stories, you know. So I will get back to it and I will read that trilogy at some point. But yeah, 50 Shades of Grey, it shouldn't be on the list, but it is. Number 9 is a book by a Scottish author, which makes me very happy to be able to include a Scottish author on my list, and that is A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol. I read all of her books this year. She is a autistic Scottish woman who is writing stories about neurodivergent characters, and they are middle grade, which I don't really read middle grade that often, but this just sounded so good. You know, it's a Scottish author and it's something different, and this one, A Kind of Spark, is about a young girl who is campaigning for her town to create a memorial for these women that were burned as witches for being different centuries ago, and she draws the parallels between the women being burned for being different and how she's treated as an autistic child. I think she's about 10, 11 years old, I think. And this book was just so incredible because it is a really strong story with really strong characters, and the family dynamic were amazing. There was so much like heartfelt, like just, you could really tell that Elle McNichol knows what she's writing about and can do it well. But then it also kind of teaches you about some common misunderstandings about autistic people, and just like clears things up in not a preachy way. The messages that you're given are very well suited to the story and the parts of the story that they come into. It never feels forced. It's not like preachy at all. It is just like a story about an autistic young girl and her experience in the world, and how we as readers can look at her experience and look at the different ways that people are treating her, and you know, do better ourselves. So I just thought this book was incredible, and I thought that all of her books are really good. She has written so far, this one was contemporary, and then there's a fantasy one, and then there's a sci-fi one, and they all feature neurodivergent characters. So I have really enjoyed all of her work so far, and of course also she's Scottish, which I love, so I cannot wait to see what she writes next. Number 8 is Heroine by Mindy McGuinness, and this is about a young girl, Mickey, who is a high school athlete, and she is like the star athlete. Like, everyone in the team loves her, she does great at school, she has so many friends, she has an untraditional family, which definitely comes into play at some points, but overall, like, she has a huge support system around her. But then she gets in a car accident and ends up being addicted to pain pills, and she meets other people who also use drugs along the way, and together they all kind of spiral into this mess. They go from painkillers to heavier stuff, and the book was so raw and so dark at times. It's not one I would recommend to everyone, but it was just so full of character, and again, it really teaches you empathy for people that are going through similar situations. You know, it really shows that you cannot judge people for their choices, and that you should want people to get help, and you should help them get help. And I really like that, because none of the characters in this that were using drugs were, you know, like junkie stereotypes. They were all like successful students, and others, you know, they all had their own backstories about why they ended up in this drug addiction. And you see Mickey turn from this star athlete into like a sobbing, just thinking mess, where everyone has kind of turned their back on her, everyone has like gave up on her, and it's really sad, and it's quite a dark book, but it also is quite hopeful. Obviously, you know, it shows how you can get yourself out of this mess. And what I also liked is that it was very raw and felt very real, but it also wasn't like an instruction manual on how to do drugs or anything like that, which I think it could be really easy for a book like this to go into that category. Just with like the way it describes scenes, like it doesn't ever go in that direction. It's just a very dark, raw, real story about drug addiction and young people, and especially, you know, there's a whole epidemic, I think mostly in the US, but all over the world, about people becoming addicted to prescribed painkillers that the doctors are giving them, and then they become addicted to it. So yeah, it was a really interesting book, and it really left an impact on me. And at number 7, I have Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. And again, this feels like a book that needs no introduction. It is basically like the gay YA book, and obviously it was like a hugely famous film because it was like kind of the first teen romance rom-com type gay film. And yeah, so I feel like it doesn't need much of an introduction, but basically it's about this boy Simon who is starting to discover his sexuality, and he is in this flirty online relationship with another guy in his school called Blue, and they email back and forth, but they don't know who each other are. And it's just a story about him coming to terms with his sexuality and everything that comes with that. And I really enjoyed it. I really actually, and I hate saying stuff like this, it's so cringe to me, but I really did see myself in Simon and like his journey and his thought patterns and just the way he seen himself and the world around him at that age. I could relate to it quite a lot. And I also really loved the email conversations between him and Blue. I actually really enjoy, and this goes back to 50 Shades of Grey. This is when I realised that I like this in books, is when you see like emails or texts between characters, because it feels like the author can strip away all of like the wordplay and all of like the descriptions and everything that comes into writing a book, and just like write basic human texts and like conversations, and I really actually enjoy that. So that was quite fun. And yeah, Simon Versus is just one of those books that really came out at the right time, hit the right spot, and it's going to be pretty iconic for the rest of the time, I would say, for just like what it impacted on literature, and especially YA literature, and especially, you know, for gay and LGBT kids and even adults, you know, reading it. So yeah, it was a really cute, special book, and I am glad I finally got around to reading it. My number 6 choice is Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Suzanne, and this is a book following 3 women in the entertainment industry, and it was published in 1966. I believe it's set around that time period, and it follows them as they just try to become successful in different avenues, in different ways in the entertainment industry. and it deals with a whole host of topics like, you know, sex, blackmail, drug abuse, eating disorders, just mental health in general, and, you know, like the whole, all the pitfalls and dangers of the entertainment industry. And it felt very relevant even today. You could see that the issues with the entertainment industry, and specifically Hollywood, that existed in the 1960s, they still exist today. Like the exact same issues like are so prevalent throughout history of film and celebrity. And what I thought was really interesting is that if you took the characters' names and switched them for, you know, really famous celebrities of, we'll say the 2000s, you know, like Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, Anna Nicole Smith, it's the same story. You can see like history repeating itself, and obviously this is fiction, but it's just so interesting to me how prevalent these issues are today and they were then. But yeah, this book was just full of drama, non-stop drama. It really highlights the difficulties of the entertainment industry, but then also just of female friendships. And I obviously don't have that experience of being in a female friendship, but I just thought this Jacqueline Suzanne, I think that's how you say her name, it's either Suzanne or Susan, just has such a real writing style. She isn't very fancy with her words. She doesn't try and be like elaborate and like do poetic wordplay or anything. Like her writing style is very straight to the point. But because the book is just so full of drama and action, that really lends itself well to just being a really entertaining book that I think is still relevant today. At number 5, we have Made by Stephanie Land, and this is a memoir about the author's experience becoming homeless with a really young daughter and having to work as a maid to try and get her way out of homelessness, but then also how the American system of benefits really traps people in the cycle of poverty. And I was so blown away by this book because when I was first given it as a gift, I was like, oh, that looks okay. I didn't think it would really be for me, because especially when I saw it was a non-fiction, I was like, no offense to maids, but how interesting can that really be? But I was so wrong. Like being a maid, she makes it seem like the most interesting job in the world. What I really liked is that she balanced, you know, talking about like the homelessness and poverty and all of the stuff that she was trying to do to get out of that in terms of benefits and stuff, with stories of the different clients' houses that she would go to. And they were so entertaining. She would just describe these people's houses in the most fascinating ways, and she would like make up like personalities for the house owners based on the things that she would find around her house, which you definitely would do. Like I know for a fact, I worked in a supermarket for a few months just as like a part-time little contract, not even part-time, like temporary, and I would collect people's orders for them that they'd done online, and just based on like their orders, I would make up little stories in my head of like what these people must be like and, you know, what their family was like, so I could completely understand going in someone's house and like going through their personal stuff, basically, not like in an invasive way, but just, you know, like cleaning around their bedroom and everything. You would make up these stories as well, so I just thought that was really interesting and fun. But then I also really liked how she showed the pitfalls of the American benefit system. And for example, when she was working as a maid, if she earned even a couple dollars more on her working wage, she would lose hundreds of dollars of benefits. So it's actually more beneficial to her to earn less, because then she gets more money. And that's just such a messed up system that it's just so broken, and she really highlights that and similar issues like that. So I would really recommend this book to everyone. This is one of those books that I think everyone should read. It's very timely, very relevant. It, you know, highlights the difficult situation that's going on today around the world, but especially in America. Like me being there for the last 2 months, the homelessness issue there is insane, and it just shows like how many just ordinary people are pushed into homelessness and poverty. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. At number 4, we have a bit of a lighter choice. This was a really funny book, and that was A Glasgow Kiss by SOPHIE GRAVIA. This is about a trainee nurse, Zara, who is trying to find a boyfriend, pretty much, and she's going on all these dates. They're always going wrong. There's always like some sort of issue. The guys are always weirdos, or something always happens. And then a doctor in her clinic that she works in starts to show interest in her, and they have a little bit of a romance that starts to brew up. And it's a rom-com novel. You can tell where it goes from there. What I was surprised about, so I listened to this on audiobook, and I thought it was just going to be like a normal rom-com. There was a lot of erotic scenes, but what I really enjoyed is they were written to be funny rather than sexy. Like there is a lot of sex in this book, but it was written in like a really humorous way. And I was listening to this audiobook, and the narrator was so good. She was from Glasgow herself, I assume, just based on her accent. and she could do the characters' voices so well, but she could also do like the line delivery of the jokes and stuff so well. I was like trying not to laugh out loud so hard. I was like out in public listening to this book, like gasping, like so shocked at what I was hearing sometimes, and just trying not to laugh out loud. And that made the reading experience or the listening experience even better, just because it was just so funny. The book itself is so funny, and then just like listening to it in public, I was like, oh my god, what have I got myself into? But yeah, this is just like a classic romantic comedy type book. It was really fun. It's full of funny characters, and there's actually a sequel out which I haven't read yet, but I really want to. I definitely need to. And again, I'm going to do an audiobook, and I'm praying that it's the same narrator because she was so good in this one. But yeah, I would definitely just recommend this one if you are into like romance books. It was really fun, and I liked, obviously, like it was very Scottish humour sometimes, which I did enjoy. One thing I did note in my Goodreads review is that it was a little bit mean-spirited at times. Like the way that Zara would like think about other women, sometimes it was a little bit mean, but overall, it was such a great book that I just really had a great fun time with it. In third place, I have A Little Life by HANYA YANAGIHARA, and I know this is a controversial book in the online book world, but I absolutely loved A Little Life, and I went into it with so many preconceived notions. So I went into it and I was like, oh, this is going to be rubbish, like this is going to be exploitative, blah blah blah. And I had all these thoughts in my head, and as I was reading it, I was like finding things to agree with that in my head. But as the story went on, I just felt more and more in love with Yanagihara's writing and the story she constructed. I personally think that it is like masterfully crafted. I do think that I don't know how to even describe what A Lot of Life is about. I just rather than do it. It's such a famous book as well. It's like a character study on this main character Jude and his friends growing up in New York, and it's all about trauma. And it's basically like Jude from like a teenager up until the end of his life. It chronicles everything, and it is intense. It is a very very intense book. It actually did make me cry. I know everyone on booktube cries about it, and I was like, I'm not a crier, but I cried at the end of this book, which I don't think I've ever really done for a book. Like I've teared up a little bit here and there, but I've never actually like cried properly until A Little Life, and it just hit me so deeply. It's a very dark book. I would not recommend it to everyone. There's like 1,000 trigger warnings, and one of the big criticisms is that like how can this many bad things happen to one person? Jude gets put through the ringer. Like everything bad that can happen to a human being happens to Jude. And I think that, well, yes, it's unrealistic in that sense. I think that the way that she has wrote the book and the story and weaves everything together, and everything comes back to childhood trauma, and all the events make sense to me just based on like the timeline of how they happen and everything that comes out of each of them. I think that it does all make sense, and I don't agree. I'm trying not to go into spoilers, but I don't agree with a lot of people's takes on this book about the exploitation, and there's a lot of thought pieces about the way that she writes like gay male characters, and I personally don't see an issue with any of it from the way that I read the book anyway. Everyone has their own opinion, of course, but I really just enjoyed it. Well, enjoyed is a weird word, but I just thought this book was, like I've said, just crafted so perfectly. It was a real masterpiece, honestly, I thought, and I was just blown away by it. I was very, very impressed. In second place, I have Gone by Michael Grant, and this book series is like my highlight of the entire reading year. This is a placeholder for the entire series because I absolutely adored this series so much. When I started Gone, I've had it on my shelf forever and I just never got around to it. And I picked it up and I could not put it down. I raced through the entire 6-book series so fast. I was like going through, I think I read one of the books at least in like one day. Like I was just going bang, 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 like the entire series. I adored it, and I haven't even spoken about what it's about yet. So the premise of the very first book is that suddenly everyone over the age of, I believe, 16 disappears out of this town, and all the kids are like, oh, what is going on? And then they discover that there's a huge force field over the town, so no one can really leave. And then some of the kids start developing different superpowers, or just powers, maybe, well, yeah, superpowers. And society just starts to fall apart. They try their best to keep things together. Different factions grow up. There's different people fighting. These superpowers are in the mix. And then as the series goes on, like animals start to get affected. The plants start to get affected. They run out of food. There is just so much chaos in this entire series. It was insane. And At the start of this video, actually, I said in my intro, I was like, I've not had a book that really stuck with me as being like an all-time favourite. That's true for like an individual book, but as a series, this Gone series is now one of my top series of all time. I absolutely adored it. I had so much fun reading it. There is some issues with it, of course. It's not perfect. There's an autistic character that I don't think is written the very best. These books did come out in the early 2000s, I believe. So obviously our understanding of everything has changed. And if these books were written today, I don't think they would be written the same. Because there were some scenes with the autistic character that, they're not comfortable to read from a 2022 perspective. But if you overlook that, which I definitely recommend, like the series overall, it's worth it because everything about the series was just so fun. The characters were amazing, the drama, the stakes, there was like body horror at points. Like, this is a YA series, but it got dark, and I just had a blast reading the entire series. And I know there's like a sequel series. I've been warned it's not very good. I was going to read it and then I wasn't, and now I'm like, oh, should I again? We'll see. There's plenty of time in life to read it, but yeah, Gone was just an absolute roller coaster of a ride. And then my number one book of 2022 was Red Comet, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark. This book has over 1,000 pages of text and then about 200 pages of references and notes. It is the definitive guide to Sylvia Plath's life. It goes into more detail than you can ever imagine. It is the most impressive biography I have ever read, and I think that I ever will read, because of the amount of detail that Heather Clark has found out about Sylvia Plath's life. She goes through every single possible source there is. Sylvia Plath and her mother saved all or most of their letters that they wrote to each other through basically their lives. And, you know, there's a wealth of information on Sylvia Plath, and Heather Clark brings it all together so perfectly and tells an amazingly exciting and enjoyable experience just for you to read. It is amazing. Like, there's no other word for it. It is just the most perfect biography I can imagine. And I do think that if you're not a Sylvia Plath fan, it is too much information. Like, if you are not obsessed with Sylvia Plath, you're going to be like, why am I reading about her great grandfather's like potato farm? That's I made that example up, but you know, like, it goes into a lot of detail. There's like at least one, maybe two chapters about like her family before she's even born. And you know, this is a over 1,000-page book. Like, these chapters are not little tiny chapters, but I just loved everything about it. I thought it was amazing. I've said amazing so many times so far, but it just was like, I loved it. It made me feel so close to Sylvia Plath. It made me want to scream. It made me happy. It made me want to cry. Like, every emotion, because you just live her life with her. And because of her letters, like, you know a lot of like things went on in her life through her own words. And as Heather Clark just brings everything together so well in such a digestible way there, where obviously the book is over 1,000 pages, but it's so bingeable at times. And I just really enjoyed my reading experience. So those were my top 10 books of 2022, and I think I say this every year, but after talking about them and putting this list together and actually verbalizing it on camera, I've started to realize that maybe 2022 was a better reading year than I originally thought, because I actually really did love these 10 books. And if you include like the 50 Shades series and the Gone series, like, I don't know, I actually really had a good year. I didn't feel it at the time, but now looking back, I'm like, actually, I did have a really good year. So if you have read any of these books and you have any opinions on them, please let me know in the comments down below. Obviously, some of them are pretty popular. I haven't really read as many like classics and like niche books this year, but hopefully maybe next year I'll get back to doing that some more. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. Again, leave any thoughts in the comments down below. Please subscribe if you have not already. I post bookish videos sometimes. I'm planning on doing more of them. Travel videos, which are kind of over now because I'm not traveling for a while. And then vegan videos, which are sprinkled in here and there. But yeah, we're going to be back to the book videos, everyone, I promise. So yeah, thank you for sticking with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one.